in this video, I will talk about how to take various kinds of tests. For example, we'll talk about how to take objective tests, theory tests, and subjective tests. So we'll take a look at how the interface looks like for these various type of tests. So let's get started. So let me show you how to take test as a candidate using TestCentre application. First, we need to decide which candidate to use. So I'm going to use James as our candidate. So I'm going to filter by James so that I will see all the tests we've registered for James. So these are the tests we have registered for James, right? One of them is pending, the other is not licensed. So the way this is how you take tests. So the user gets to use the TestCentre client. So let me launch the TestCentre client. So this is the interface where the candidate will take tests. So this application will be on all the clients' PC, and all the candidate need to do is to just enter their reg number. So the question is, which of the tests will show up? The test that will show up is the next available test. So let's say I have like 10 tests registered for James. The most recent, the latest test will come last, whereas the earliest test will come first. But then if you have not licensed the earliest test, then it is whatever that is licensed that will show up. So what that means is, among these two tests, I don't expect to take this particular unlicensed test. So the only test that will show up is this. So let's get started. Let's take a look at what happens when we click proceed. Once you click proceed, you can see that we now have English, maths, commerce, biology, and economics. So let's compare that with what we have here as the subject combination. So this is the subject combination, which is precisely what we are seeing on the client end. So let's proceed. So once you click proceed, it gets to this point, then the candidate can see instructions, all the instructions as regards how to go about the test. And once the candidate is ready, the candidate can click start. The other thing to note is the title of this test. This title here on this test is going to be the title of the content and the content name. So this UTME practice correspond with the content from which this test was set. So if you check the name, that's the content name of this UTME mock. The test we are conducting now is from this particular content, this UTME mock content, and the content name is UTME practice. So whatever the author set as the content name, that's exactly what the candidate will see at the very top here. So let's get started. So let's click start. So once you click on start, you get to commence the test. So the test, here we have the question, you select the option, you click next, and you can see that we have previous, next, and you can also navigate using keyboard, like P means previous and N means next. You move to the next, then you just pick options with A, B, C, and so on. You can check the 9 keys to know how to navigate using keys, the keys on the keyboard. So let's move on to the next question, and let's quickly answer a few some of the questions here. So another thing you need to note is you can directly go to any question number by just clicking the question number. Then you can do the same thing at any point in time. And you can also switch to any subject at any point in time as well. So I've switched to mathematics. You can read out questions using the voice icon. Then another thing you can do is you can also use the on-screen calculator as a candidate in case you need to compute some numbers. So what I'm going to do now is to quickly select some options. Okay, so the other thing we can do is we can log out. So the interesting thing about this application is you can log out and log in again, but I'm going to talk about various settings as regard logout and so on. While this is ongoing, let's take a look at the status on the admin application. So if you check the status on the admin application, you can see that the status is now telling us the test is ongoing. So this test is currently ongoing. So that's one thing you need to note. So you can easily know the status of any test if you check the test records that you have here. So let's go back to the test. So this is how the interface of the objective looks like. I'm going to quickly get this done and submit. Note that if you log out at this point, currently we're on economics question number 25. So let's log out and let's resume the exam. I'm going to type the reg number, proceed. Now you can see that the remaining time is 26 minutes, 5 seconds out of 30 minutes. So you can always log out and log in. And now you can see that we are seeing exactly where we stopped before we logged out. So this application is very effective in keeping track of the state of the test of any candidate. So now that I'm done with the exam, the next thing is to submit. So I'm going to click submit, then submit the exam. So once you submit the exam, for this particular setting, the candidate gets logged out and the test is basically over. There are other settings that can allow a candidate to see results and to even see correction. So I'll talk about that in a later video. How do you change the settings of an exam to allow for candidates to see their results immediately or to allow them to see corrections immediately? So let's go back to the admin application. From the admin application, you can see that if we refresh this page by just clicking on this manage, the status has now updated to submitted. This test is over. This test is done. If I try to log in again with that same reg number, let's see what happens. I'm going to type James, then proceed. So what I'm getting is you don't have any pending test at the moment. So at the moment, there is no pending test, and that's why I can't take this test for this particular candidate. So you should know that if there's no pending test or you've not licensed any test for this candidate, you can't take test. Let's go back to the admin application. So the next thing I need to talk about is how do you take theory test? So we've talked about objective test. So what about theory? I'm going to create another test for James. So I'm going to set a new test. And this James, I'm going to proceed. Then this time around, I'm going to take SSC theory. And I want to have like just the subject. And let me click proceed. The subject I want to have is, let me pick civic education. And I just want to take this test for 30 minutes. I'm going to click send. So now we have a new test for James. We need to license this test before we can commence. So I'm going to provide my password, my license password, and click license. So now that we've licensed this test, we can take this test. So let's take a look at how it looks like. I'm on the client application. I'm going to click proceed. So now I have civic education, 19 questions in total. And the instruction, I can always check that. Then let me just proceed. So now we have this question for Henry. So this is the theory question. The question is as follows. What are values? So in this particular case, this question is gradable. It uses it compares the answer that I'm going to provide with the provided answer and match and checks for proximity and grades accordingly. But let me not talk about how it grades. Let me just tell you that you can provide theory questions for your candidates. And if you don't want them to type the question here, you can tell them to write the answer. If you don't want them to write the answer on this application, you can tell them to write the answer on a sheet of paper and you grade the answer manually. So you don't have to rely on the software for grading. You can just do your grading offline manually. But the good thing about using this application for your theory is that you can save cost on paper-based exam where you have to print every question that you give to your candidate. So you can save a lot of costs by setting computer-based theory exam rather than having to print questions for your candidate. So the next is let's check the next question, and so on. So you can see how the theory shows up. It shows up without any option, right? And you have all of this, and that's it. That's basically what the theory entails. So you can see that we have question 7a and so on and so forth. I'm going to talk about how you can change the setting of this quick view. This section where you have numbering, we call that the quick view. You can quickly switch to any question. That's why it's called a quick view. I'm going to talk about change the setting into various types. So once you are done, you submit as a candidate, and that's it. You are done, and it locks you out. Now let's talk about another type of question, which is subjective. So I'm going to set another exam which has a content that contains both objective and subjective questions. Subjective questions are like filling the gap question or German question. So let's take a look at this example. Let me set a new test for James. Then I'm going to pick a content that I know contains both objective and subjective. So this time I'm going to pick civic education, and the time, let me just leave it as let me choose 10 minutes. There's only one season and we have just 2 questions in total. So I'm going to click on send. Now we've got a new test. I'm going to license this test. So now that I've licensed this test, the next thing I need to do is to take the test. So let's go back to the client application. On the client application, I'm going to type James, then proceed. So let's start. So this is a subjective question. So what makes this different from theory is this can be graded precisely. So what that means is you can have both objective and subjective side by side. So if you check question number 1 is subjective, question number 2 is objective. So you have options here, right? So let me pick maybe right hand side, then let's type the right answer, which is 90/60, right? So let's submit this 90/60, and yeah, let's submit this, and that's it. So you can have subjective tests, you can have tests that are objective based and theory based. So this shows how you can go about all of that. It's all about your content. Your content determines the type of test or question your candidates will see.